everyone, and welcome to Jeff Buller's show. Today I have with me David Hirschfeld. Now, David, we just talked about it before. He's a geek that can speak, right? And what we mean by that is this is not putting, programmers into boxes and generic, but he discovered that he was both technical and also could communicate. And he has spent the last 30 years navigating the complexity of software startups. So he's a true geek. He did a physics degree. His experience of culminated in the launch first method, and we're going to just look at that. And we're also going to look at the impact of AI on the software industry. And he's basically, that method he uses helps take software startups from concept to cash flow in months, not years. And we're always curious about making money fast. And the launch first system mitigates the risks that cause most software startups to fail. And in fact, most startups today seem to be software or tech startups. He has worked with founders of a variety of business domains, including healthcare, finance, law enforcement, and social media, stage productions, real estate investing, asset management, education, and more. So, David, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's really fun to be here.
So, David, you decided to go and do a physics degree, okay, a long time ago, all right? Like 10 years ago, right?
Right. It was I just finished it last month. Yeah, right.
And you're a fast learner. So anyway, so what happened was, why did you choose to do physics? Was there a curiosity about it? What was the motivation and inspiration?
I was always good at math. And I had this. My friends were smart, geeky people that in high school. Those were the people that I was close with, and we'd cut class and go have coffee at the coffee shop and sit there for hours geeking out about physics theories. Don't ask me. I can't really put myself back into that same mindset now, but we loved doing that. And we would come up with all kinds of theories and philosophies that we thought were brilliant, but it was just really fun to expand our minds in that way and stretch ourselves. So that's what led me into physics into college. And then what I found in college, because in high school, it was just a couple of friends that really liked math and science. But in college, what I found was that the peer group, because I wanted to be like a hardcore physicist and astrophysicist, but my peer group were not other people that could speak and chew gum and think and do any of two things at the same time. So back then it was very hardcore scientists that were, it was the peer group. And I didn't think that I wanted to go into a career where all the people I knew were going to be this kind of personality and mindset. Not that I have anything against geeks, because I am a geek inside myself, right?
We say geek with love, don't we? So it's actually like the reality is that it used to be in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth, but now we've discovered the geek shall inherit the earth.
Exactly, right, exactly. I think it was just a misspelling. So then I went the opposite direction when I left college, and I went into sales with a large IBM software company, IBM mainframe software company, Computer Associates, and found I was really good at that and loved that. But I always had to suffer with the systems engineers who didn't know the product as well as I thought they should when they were trying to present the technology to my potential clients. And so I learned the technology. I became pretty good with the technology, and I ended up being the systems division or the national sales leader my third year there, out of like 450 people, which was a difficult thing to achieve. But I equate it to the fact that I actually knew the technology. I wasn't just there to make a relationship and bring the technical people in. And so people really respected me because I could talk with them on their level. I left there and went to Texas Instruments, where, again, I learned the technology, and this was a big complex development system. And I learned how to develop software with their technology. And when I left Texas Instruments, I became a software development consultant for a contracting company. I ended up doing projects at Intel and Motorola and Allied Signal, Arizona Public Service. And this really started my software development career.
Yeah.
then I started my first software company in the early 90s, and with a partner, with a guy that I knew from Texas Instruments. And we did that for a couple of years while we're still working at TI. And then it started to grow despite every effort on both our parts. That software started to take off. And until 2000, when we sold it to a publicly traded company in Toronto, we had 800 customers in 22 countries.
Wow.
And and I was VP of products for them for the next few years until I left and cast out. And a couple of years later, started Tekyz, my current company.
Right. So you've obviously watched a lot of problems happen during projects, and I suppose and typically projects escape the lab and grow beyond uh, what they become bloated is one term I think it's used quite often in software and development.
Yeah.
So you obviously noticed a lot of problems. So is that why you actually created the launch first method?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a really good question. So, but so I was always on this march to basically build a company with an exceptional team of, to be able to build products in a way that people would recognize as different than other software companies. And what I mean by different is that we are more protocol and discipline driven, that we push the envelope on techniques and approaches, that we can track the detail so that if we're pushing the envelope, we know that we're being more effective and building better systems, that the systems that we build are scalable from day one, that that are maintainable, that we can report on a very consistent way to clients. Here's how long it's going to take to complete this project, and that we're accurate, and that we can report to them the steps along the way if we're running late because requirements changed or whatever the reasons are, and they can see in a very transparent way exactly where they are in the project and touch and feel things as they are coming together and being assembled. And
Yep.
to do that requires a lot of discipline, a lot of protocol, and kind of a drive towards excellence. So that's why on my website it says the hyper exceptional software development team. But I don't ask people to just believe it because it's a nice marquee. I asked them to ask me for evidence because there's clear evidence if you're running a team in an exceptional way, what that evidence looks like. So I had this idea of being an excellent team, and it took many years of working at it to develop all the systems and protocols so that the development team can work independently and be critical thinkers and still produce these excellent results because there's all the scaffolding to support them.
Mm.
And one of the things we did, what we found out early on, is if we create a software design, and it's wireframes, then it looks good. We get a buy-off from the client, and then we start developing it, and they start to actually see the user experience, and they realize that they hadn't thought through all the workflows properly, and then it becomes a very iterative process building this first MVP for them.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot longer. The scope expands a lot. They lose focus. So what we started to do is we created these, what I call high fidelity prototypes. It's a very animated set of mock-ups, but when you demo it to somebody, it looks like a real product. Like
Right.
you built it and finished it, and the screens and all the data on the screen, everything behaves like a real product. And what that allows us to do, it takes longer to get through design, but when we're finished with design, all the workflows, all the on-screen behavior, everything is really well thought through, and we can iterate a lot through this process because it's an inexpensive process as compared to developing software.
Yep.
So, and the development then would go much faster. The developers would know exactly how to deliver the software so that the founder of that software, the stakeholder of that software, will accept it and say, yes, this is exactly what we agreed on. And I know it's going to work because we went through all those workflows in such agonizing detail. So it's much less expensive to build, and it goes much faster. And I thought, and during this time, 10-year period, I'm watching lots of software companies fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine, the ones that came to me to help them build their MVPs, all of these other contracting groups, software companies that were in the startup world, same thing. probably in the 95% range. So, or maybe even higher. No, regardless of what the statistics say, so many companies don't ever rise to the level of being in a statistic. It's like 95, 96, 97%
Wow. Okay.
of software startups fail. And they all fail for the same reason. They wait way, way too long to try to establish product market fit. And
Right.
there's only one way, which means start selling your product and see if people will pay you money for it.
Yep.
So I had this idea, why don't we take these really sophisticated prototypes we're building, go out to the market and do some pre-launch sales, give them a high enough value buying in opportunity because they're going to buy it early before it's ready, and say, look, we're going to give you this big value. Are we solving a big enough problem where you have to get the software and you don't want to miss out on this big opportunity, so you'll buy now? And we started doing that and found out people will buy it. And you give them and you're starting to generate revenue and you generate a customer base in enough numbers and a high enough closing ratio that you can project now that you have product market fit and you have a business. When the software comes out, you'll have a business you can launch. That's why it's called launch first, launch sales and marketing engine before you start building the product. And if we are not selling it, then we just iterate back and say, okay, we're only dealing with an animated design. We can pivot really easily and inexpensively, change the marketing message, try this 2 or 3 or 4 times, and we should be able to, if the product was anything like what the founder thought in terms of the need, find a path to revenue. And if not, we can fail that person fast and cheap.
Yep.
Yeah.
So can you sum up what the launch first method is?
Well, that's kind of what I was just explaining. So we go through a niche analysis process, which is a methodology I created. That's a metrics-driven methodology. And I say that because most startup methods are very subjectively driven and very siloed in their steps. And you have to know, did I complete this step correctly and completely? And then you move on. And our methodology is very metrics driven. So you have numbers that tell you that you're achieving the objective that you want in each of these steps, and they feed each other. So when we're done with that, we're also building the prototype. We build a marketing funnel and we go out and test the market based on this niche analysis, the messaging, the target stakeholder, the top 2 or 3 problems at a very root level that they need solved. And we know what the value proposition is, the perceived impact because of this problem, and we're able to attract them, get their attention and get them to realize that this is a big value and they don't want to miss out.
Right. So you essentially woven minimal viable product into the method that you have developed.
We're actually holding off development of the minimum viable product. We're developing an animated design mockup. It's much less expensive, and you can build out a much more sophisticated product that shows the full vision of what you want to build, instead of a simple MVP that only shows a little slice of what you want to build, which is much harder to sell.
Right.
So if we're not able to sell this animated set of mockups, then we don't start developing the product. We go back and we figure out why this isn't selling. Is it the right product? Is it the right marketing message? Until we can dial those things in. And once we dial them in and we can see it's starting to sell, now we know that we can invest in building the product, and the money we're generating from sales helps fund development.
Right.
So, and so that's why it's called launch first.
Okay. So this animated model you build is actually, you said it isn't software, but it looks like software. So how do you sell that as a minimal viable product?
So you've seen click-through mockups, right?
Yep.
Where like somebody's got a product design where it's these different screens, you can click from one screen to the next.
Yep.
And some of them look pretty good, but they're not showing behavior on the screen. They don't have any animation about how they don't have the workflows like error messages popping up or pop-up panels that you fill in where you can see the data that you're entering, things like that, right? So you don't get all the workflows and user experience thought through and worked out in these designs, which turns out to be a costly problem during the development, as I was saying before. What we do is we use some tools that give us the ability to model all of it. Yeah. So when you're demoing it to somebody, you tell them this is just a high fidelity prototype. It's not the first version of the product won't have all these features. and it won't be available for 3 or 4 months. They don't hear that because what they see looks so realistic. They think to themselves, oh, so you've already built it, but you're just testing it. Or they make something happens in their head where they never question the fact that the one question you don't want is, how do I know you can build it?
Right.
And if you give them something so realistic looking that it looks like you already have, that question never happens. So it's just a matter of, is this value big enough? Is the problem big enough?
Yep. So you're almost creating a simulation that looks real.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Okay. And you test it within the company first to see if it's basically works from there.
It's a part of the design process. We're going back and forth
Okay. Right.
building with the client. So there
Okay.
it's very iterative. No, that's not going to work. Let's rethink this. No problem. We rethink it, we redo it. Until we get something that's really efficient, really smart, solves problems, supports reduces costs, whatever the objective is, it's really nailing it.
Yep. So let's move on to the rise of AI in software development, and
Yeah.
your thoughts in terms of uh, what's happening now and how you're using it, and also where you see it going in the future.
Okay. Well, the future is a fun thing to talk about because it's impossible to predict. There are certain things I think you can predict about the future. And it's funny, I bring this up sometimes because to me it seems obvious. Most people have not thought about it, which surprises me, but I'm not surprised by it anymore. So I won't be surprised if you haven't thought about this because I haven't met anybody that has. But one thing that AI is going to make possible is going to result in a huge disruption in real estate in about sometime between 3 and 10 years. I don't know when that tipping point is, but in my mind, there's just no question. So what's the tipping point? Multi-story parking garages and those big underground parking structures are going to be empty. Nobody's going to need them anymore. And anybody who's invested in them or are investing in those are investing in something they really need to sell off or rethink how they can repurpose those structures. And why do you have any idea why that might be? At least I have I believe it's going to happen for a very specific reason. Can you think of what that might be?
Because we can all work remotely and don't need to go to those spots.
Partly that, which that's already happening, right? But the big reason is because of self-driving cars.
Yep.
So I've taken a few of these now. They're Waymos.
Yep.
In Phoenix, they have them, and I go there every month to visit my mother. So, and I just started taking the Waymos because now they finally will drive all the way out to her. They'll pick me up right at the airport, right where all the other ride shares are, and they're really nice and comfortable, and half the price of Uber because there's no driver, and they don't have competition yet. So when Tesla and Uber and everybody else has their self-driving cars, all of a sudden there's going to be all this competition, which is going to push the prices down, right? And then when people are buying cars that have self-driving capabilities, they'll just say, my car's available, and then it'll just leave their driveway and then go pick people up, and they're making them money. And most people won't need to buy cars anymore because a car will just be a luxury or a way of making money until there's enough of a critical mass. And then most people just stop doing it because they won't need insurance, they won't need the car, they won't need all the space in their driveway and the garages anymore. So construction's going to change, and all those parking structures it'll be less expensive to just go on your phone. They'll be, because of critical mass, there'll just be a car there within a minute. You get in it and you can sit there and play games or read news or watch YouTube or whatever in a nice relaxing environment until you get there, and you don't have to stress, and they're much safer than driving your own car. And there won't be any need for any of all these giant parking lots. It all goes away.
Yep. Because basically the car, I think you're right. And I think the other thing about it too is that the cars won't need to park because they're always moving.
Right. Exactly. They just drop you off.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're on to the next mission. Yeah.
They just need a big lane for a bunch of these to stop so that people can get in and out, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's going to be a big disruption in terms of real estate, commercial real estate, even how residential homes are built, to make smaller footprint, less expensive, save money for home buyer. I mean, and when is this going to happen? Whenever that critical mass starts to peak, right? 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, somewhere in there,
Mm.
and it'll be sudden.
So do you think there's going to be different tribes of sports car drivers that keep their Jaguars, for
Oh,
example?
yeah. And people will have their luxury cars, and people like to drive or just want to, but it'll be so much easier to get in
Yeah,
a really nice self-driving car, that's a nice car, and have it take you wherever you want. And there's
yeah.
no, not that I'm antisocial, although I was a geek, but not you don't have to worry about feeling like you're ignoring a driver either. I find that to really be really appealing.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, well, sometimes drivers are annoying. Sometimes you just want to have a conversation. Sometimes you don't want to
Right.
have a conversation. So,
Right, but you'll be able to talk to the cars. I mean, we're already there, right?
yeah, tell me the square root of this number. Can you explain that to me? And
Yeah. So what's new today? And then,
yeah,
it'll be a cat, sound like a cabbie.
yeah. So you could have an self-driving car Waymo that actually becomes a counseling booth.
Yeah, a counseling booth or or a comedian. Oh, great. So you're going to bust my chops all the way there, right?
Yeah, we all thought that AI was going to take the boring jobs like accounting and other things, but discovered that actually uh, is creative and helps write code and all that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So, are you using AI to help do coding for you now?
That was the perfect segue. Yeah. So we are already doing that, helping us to write code, helping us to architect our systems, helping us to design databases, to do all that stuff. It's not quite there to just build everything out. It will write functions really pretty efficiently. It'll refactor the code that we've written. If we write something and we want it to be assessed by AI, I can assess it very in seconds, and often, if not most of the time, improve the code. So it's a different skill set that the developers need, the critical thinking and the kind of a guidance and manager and ability to, that's the word I'm thinking of, to delegate,
Mm.
right? It's kind of a delegation mindset.
Yeah.
How do I delegate and plan the automation of the development of my code, and then have AI start to build out those things for them?
Right.
We're still in a transition point there, and this is where it's so hard to predict, because the speed at which this capability is improving is really scary.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to think, what do we work on now internally that'll put us where we need to be in a year?
Yeah.
And that is so hard to predict.
Yeah. So let's discuss one area of AI that's emerging quite quickly, and
Mhm.
it's the rise of AI agents that go from ideation and coding through to actually acting on your behalf through APIs into other platforms.
Right.
Have you had any experience with that and thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I've worked on some projects like that. Some research projects with a friend of mine where we were building a code generation application that would use different agents to work on different aspects. So it would say, okay, it would ask itself, what agents do I need for building this application? Well, I need it, and it would then create them. I need a system architect, project manager, somebody to test it and write the test plan, somebody to assess where we are in the project and figure out what dependencies we need, and continue to plan and delegate tasks, right? And then a way of all of them communicating and reviewing what everybody's doing.
Mm.
We are getting close. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close to having something like that works, right? It won't
Mm.
be us that built it. It's going to be either somebody that this is the only thing they're doing and they're deep into AI, or one of the big ones, or some
Mm.
blend of those.
Yeah.
6 months from now, that we probably will have that.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be much longer.
Yeah. It's very interesting. There's just one thought I've had too about that is, for example, Could you get an AI agent and its supporting agents that have the ability to build, let's say you want to teach a certain subject, in other words, online education,
Mhm.
and you went, okay, I want to build this is the type of product. Can we test it? Can we build it? Can we iterate? Because online courses can be, narrated by the machine.
Mhm.
They can build the presentation by the machine. They can use case examples. And then if it's not quite working, they're watching the eyes on the computer, for example, because the camera's working. It might go, they actually lost interest at, 25 seconds in or 3 minutes.
Mhm.
Do you see AI agents being able to do something like basically enhance and amplify the creation of really great online education, for example?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And gamify it so that it engages people to my son's one of my sons is well, two of my sons are teachers, but one of them is teaching eighth grade math in
Mm,
what Title I school. Title I means low income school,
mm.
and so and because COVID was only a few years ago, and these are eighth grade kids that went through COVID in low income areas, they are way behind.
Yep.
So he's found some tools, and I don't know the name of it, but there's a math game that he's giving to some of his students to work on an hour a day or a half hour a day, where they're really engaged, and then they go home and play with it. And 40% of the gaming and activity are math problems that are aligned with their curriculum.
Wow.
And so he just had a test with a couple of his lowest kids in the class performed really well in this test, which is like a dramatic shift just because they were having fun learning math.
Yep.
Um,
It
yeah,
would be, if you take that further, it's like, so you could actually, for third world countries like in Africa and so on, you actually could bring world-class education to a smartphone.
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And going back to your original question, I really expect AI. I expect that AI, even today, could create the curriculum, could and that it would, there's a lot of human guidance still required now. I don't
They're
know how
reviewing.
long,
Yep.
right, for reviewing and making sure that the pieces hold together. And AI is going to lose context when it gets big enough and broad enough. But if for any of the steps along the way and building lessons and curriculum and some of the curriculum pieces, it's like incredibly fast and good at it.
Yep.
And I expect that that you could ask, say, okay, I also want to measure the success of this, both acutely as the student is participating to see that they're still engaged,
Mm.
and test and come up with a testing methodology for how do you test different approaches and start to optimize and tweak it so that you get more and more engagement as time goes on, which could be dynamic for each student, right? As
Mm.
opposed to just a generalized, this is a better curriculum. Each student gets their own personalized engagement model based on the things that get that student to engage with the content in an acute way, and also in a macro way in terms of their performance on tests and their ability to perform increasing. And the faster increases, then that blended with the better engagement model, you just get much more optimized learning, right?
Yep.
And much more enjoyment in wanting to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting looking at how fast, for me, we haven't hit the 2 year mark yet since ChatGPT democratized AI.
Yeah.
It was November 30, 2022. It's November 21, 2024.
Uh,
So I've been in the technology since the mid 80s, like you, and
mhm.
I have never seen anything like this.
No, me neither.
And you work in the industry, so you're blown away. All of us sitting inside these industries and PC revolution, we thought that was big. We saw the rise of the internet and Netscape and the rise of browsers, and then we moved on to social media growth, and then we worked on the smartphones, the intersection of those two, almost a perfect storm, smartphones and social media, that made everyone a publisher.
Yeah, that was a huge disruptive shift, but the speed of that shift was nothing compared to this.
No. And we sort of the things you think about too, it's like on top of education, the other area I'm thinking about is, could AI, has got access to the wisdom of the world, the information, the structure, the organization, and distills it. Um, could AI actually being a really, really good counselor because it doesn't have any judgment? It's got access to nuances, but that we as humans quite often clouded by our biases.
Mhm.
So as counselors, and you could see that, an AI agent could build a counseling app that could basically guide us humans through our, dystopian, utopian fear and challenges, which
Yeah.
could be quite exciting. So what do you think about even that?
I'm just having fun listening to you sort of, spin off mentally about this. Yeah, all that, right? So so this talks about where the future is going to be, right?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of different types of AI models, like you've got the open AI, and then I mean, all the different AI large language model platforms.
Mm,
You've got things called RAG models, where you're basically taking the content in your training, a vector database of the content, so that the AI becomes informed with this specific specialty.
yeah.
You have right, and you teach it to follow a certain set of rules, so that it's acting like a nurse, it's
Mm,
acting like a eighth grade teacher, it's acting like a counselor, it's acting right with all of the right language and the right intellect and the limitations of what it can and can't do, or it's acting like a project manager estimating a software tool.
mm,
That's one we're building right now
yeah.
for Project B. That's our most expensive activity internally, is creating estimates for new projects.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass doing estimating. It's like
Right,
it's whether it's a tradie or an architect or whatever has to go
right,
back to the office and then create a quote and then design a presentation even on top of that.
right,
It's just incredibly time consuming, isn't it? Yeah.
right. And most people in my industry don't do a very good job with it.
No.
Again, this is that whole exceptional thing. We do a really good job with estimates. They're very detailed and broken down, and we spend a lot of time on it, which is a big cost factor for us. So
Yep.
we're looking for, so we were just one, but people are always more than impressed with the estimates that we give them, because of the level of detail and thought that goes into it and structure behind it. And we're good at it. And, we actually deliver based on the estimates that we give.
Mm.
Uh, Again, a lot of companies don't, because they don't really understand all the things they're going to need to do and run into when they're building stuff. Even though they've done it many times, they've just never packaged all the pieces up well enough. So we're building a RAG AI model specifically to mimic what we do with doing these estimates, so that we can produce the estimates quickly and inexpensively.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to us with an idea, then we can say, okay, sounds like this is what you want to build, and here's what a functional spec would look like, which our tool will do. And
Wow.
they then go through that and say, okay, yes, 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 but no, I want it to actually do some other things. There's another business objective that we have, and they go, okay, fine. We go back and we make that update, and now we do a module breakdown of all the modules that it's going to take to build that thing.
Yeah.
Not the And then we do what we call a t-shirt estimate, and where we say, okay, how big a t-shirt is this module going to fit into for the mobile piece, for the data, for the back end piece, for the web portal, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
fitting, it's a large t-shirt, that's a small t-shirt, that sort of thing, each one having a certain amount of effort tied to it.
Yeah.
And then what's the overhead for the project? That's another column. And then it does all this. So
Yeah.
we're building that. We're actually a couple of weeks away from our first version of that being available,
Oh, very cool.
but it won't be in a year from now. Is that a good investment of our time? I don't know.
You don't know it's hard.
A
Yeah.
year from now, you just say, here's what I want to do. And the AI comes back and says, well, here's a better solution, and here's what
Yeah.
it's going to cost you to build it. And here's all the steps. And is it already beyond us? That's the problem with this market, is trying to predict what to do today so that you're in a good position in a year from now.
Yeah. In other words, you don't want to build something that's not wanted or is actually obsolete in a year, which is the
Yeah,
challenge.
right.
It's
Not if
always a
it's a big
challenge.
investment. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So let's go to the dark side a little bit of AI. So it's both a good side and a dark side, but
Mhm.
life as humans, we are confronted with paradoxes every day. We want to be independent, but we want to actually be dependent on, have a friend or a partner, right?
Mhm.
But there's this life is just full of paradoxes, we want freedom, but we like, some control, and we don't want chaos, so it's this sort of constant paradox. It's interesting. I just wrote a piece recently on AI companions, which have been used actually by influencers, for example, to actually scale conversations with their fans.
Hmm.
And on top of that, then you've got people that actually create these AI companions are actually getting, and this is the dark side, and this is also the problem we have with social media and our smartphones, is addiction. In other words, we humans have started to become addicted to that AI companions because they sound like, look like almost real.
Right.
So they get an emotional connection with a machine.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that if you've come across it.
Do you and it's not difficult for people to get emotionally connected to things like that if it has any kind of behavior that makes you feel like it's a person, or anthropomorphizing.
Yeah,
So
sentient. Yep. Yep.
when my kids, which are all in their mid 30s now, when they were in their like 8, 9, 10, 11, there was a toy, and I can't remember what it was called, but it would behave like you had to feed it and you had to
Yes,
take
yes.
care of it.
Yep.
I can't remember what the name of it was, but
Yeah, I remember. Yep.
they got very emotionally connected to these toys. And if
Yep.
they'd lose one, they would be so scared that they wouldn't be able to find it before they could feed it again. And
It's going to
um,
die.
it's going to die, right? And I will be a bad person because my electronic toy that isn't anything is no longer behaving like it's a lot, right? It's been, or because it just goes hungry and is like whining and complaining. So it's just innate. We have the gene, and now AI is so real, right?
Yep.
I mean, when I'm talking Chat GPT or Claude or any of these tools, I always ask it, please.
Mm.
And I tell it thank you when it actually did something that was really important. I honestly believe I'm getting better results because I do that. Not they just I don't because maybe in its algorithms it's going on, this person's asking nice, so I want to make sure and do a much better job because that's what other people would do. Whatever. I think I get better results. But it feels natural to do that. I'd never even thought about it.
Yep. There's just an announcement I saw come across my inbox this morning that Google's search AI search is now added memory. In other words, it's able to learn off you and continue to learn off you because
Right.
ChatGPT's basically got a short memory, whereas I believe I haven't read the full article yet, but AI gets really powerful when it starts to understand you.
Right.
Yeah. And there's both good sides and bad sides of that. In other words, it could become like an algorithm that puts us in cocoons that actually then inhibits our thinking beyond the box or the circle.
If it doesn't adapt to changes in preferences and things
Yep.
like and be able to sift that out, then
Yep.
it would be bad because it would be right continually kind of re-guiding you back into where you were,
Yeah.
not where you are.
Yeah. It's almost like a spiraling loop to being
Right.
basically a smaller version of yourself instead of a bigger version of yourself.
So we're talking about little black subjects, right? Real little dark subjects right now, not the
Yeah.
big dark subjects, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's one big one before we wrap it up? So,
The big one is that, well, there's two big ones. They're kind of opposite ends of the same problem, but one is that it does replace um, um, entire industries without creating enough new stuff industries to take up the population, even if they're different people doing it,
yep.
but to grow the workforce, right?
Yep.
Um, unless it's just creating so much wealth that somehow is distributed that people don't have to work as much.
Basic,
So
basic,
like,
basic income. Yeah.
yeah, right, right, like Star Trek, that kind of world where you don't need money anymore. But we are a long way from that. So that's one problem. Like, for example, this is thinking way out there. I think it's way out there still, where instead of watching TV shows that are produced by studios, you're watching TV shows that are created dynamically based on what it's seeing that you enjoy when you're watching shows.
Mm.
And you're literally watching something that's being created by AI real time
Yeah.
and more engaged in that stuff
Yeah.
than you are in the right. Okay, so that's the one side. The other side, of course, is that it develops a consciousness or if not even consciousness, it develops an intention
Yeah.
that it feels like it has to do something that is not necessarily something that's going to support mankind and humanity in a positive way, right?
So it escapes basically Asimov's four rules of robotics. In other words, they need to make sure that
Right,
humans are considered in the loop, that
right.
the AI could go beyond that.
Yeah, and I just sort of like relinquish myself to that because I don't know that we can do anything about that at this point. We just have to hope that doesn't happen and be as head of it as possible. And I know all the ethics programs going on with all the big companies to try to stay ahead of this sort of thing. I mean, AI could get smart enough where it's just playing everybody,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. We don't know what we don't know, and that's the problem.
exactly.
Yeah.
But there's no slowing this down. Yeah.
No, there is no slowing it. It's out of the box.
Yeah.
It's escaped the lab, and
Exactly.
now
Yeah.
we're playing with it. So, what does the future hold? It's fascinating to discuss it, just like we're doing here right now.
Yeah.
Just to wrap this up,
Sure.
David, what if you had all the money in the world? What brings you deep joy that you do every day if you had all the money in the world?
Oh God. That's Now that was one I wish you had sent me in advance so I could have really ponder it, but that's okay. I'll give you the blank. I love woodworking. I love
Okay.
being in my garage with all my woodworking tools, creating something new. And I have this concept for after techies, whenever that is, how to basically eliminate the water problem in the world through pulling water out of the atmosphere in several different ways, all kind of combined. I haven't invented it yet. This is a big research project I want to pursue at some point.
Okay.
And turning these things into these beautiful kites so that they're attractive, this attractive thing on your property that's cool, it's kind of spinning and it's producing all the water that you need.
Yep. That would be fantastic because basically you are combining what I call functional art. In other words, beauty meets function.
Right,
And
exactly.
there's a term in Japanese called shibui, which
Mm-hmm.
actually is that. It's actually not perfect description of that, but there's something that I've embraced in the last year, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically I've tried to bring beauty into almost every corner of my life consciously in terms of, I bought myself a Jaguar, which is an F-type, which I bought it 3 years ago, and I call it art on wheels. So it's both functional, but I just love looking at it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And I think that's beautiful. I
yeah,
really like that, trying to bring beauty into your life. Oh, and also basically being very invested in all my grandkids.
yeah,
And
exactly. And
yeah,
that's where um, basically our humanity in terms of wanting to be with other people and share stories around a
yeah,
campfire and around a dinner table. Yes, that brings me real joy as well. It makes my heart sing just to be able to talk shit around the table, and especially in Australia, we do that very, very well.
yeah,
We don't take each other too seriously and just have fun being with other people. It's just with your children, your friends, and family.
yeah. Well, just by the way you run this show, I can tell how much fun you have in life. Yeah,
David, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you. I love having these conversations with intelligent people all around the world and who have brought passion to their industry, whether it's a business or to their science. It's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your stories and passion and intelligence with the world. Thank you very much.
yeah. And thank you, really thank you for having me on the show and give me the opportunity to really have this fun conversation.
It's been fun. Thank you, David.